What are you doing? What are you doing? No, that's gasoline.
A woman was caught on Auburn Avenue in Atlanta in front of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s childhood home. She was about to burn the house down and would have been successful if it weren't for 4 out-of-towners, 2 retired NYPD officers, and 2 men from Utah. Who is this woman and what is her problem with MLK? I'm going to get into that along with details about the house and the legacy this woman was about to destroy. But first, take a second to make sure that you're subscribed to the channel and click the notification bell for all updates. Everyone watching right now, drop MLK below in the comments.
This morning, we're getting a look at new body cam video from Atlanta police showing the moments they arrested a woman accused of trying to burn down the historic birth home of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. For the first time, we are also hearing from 2 retired New York police officers who jumped in to stop her and save the home. 11 Alive's John Schierick also spoke with the National Park Service about reevaluating security there to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Atlanta police video from Thursday night showing the tourists who were surrounding the woman they had detained because of what they'd seen her do minutes earlier. Video shows the woman pouring gasoline on the birthplace of Martin Luther King Jr., then getting a lighter. Now the tourists were helping police handcuff her in front of the house. Among them, 2 retired New York City police officers. They tell me they had chased her down the street when she tried to get away. Kenny Dodson on the left and his brother Axel Dodson now back home in New York.
And apprehended her, walked her back to the scene.
Then later, they say, it hit them.
Well, the significance of it, with the whole thing being that it's MLK's home, and for something like that to possibly happen to his home, to lose something like that, historical location, that's why it really hit us.
The same for Zach Kempf, the tourist from Utah who recorded this video. When Kempf and his coworker realized what the woman was doing, they intervened to stop her, as Kempf told us Thursday night.
She would have just gone up and started a fire.
Now the superintendent of the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historical Park, Judy Forte, says everyone is evaluating how to increase security at the home and hoping they don't have to install a fence.
But if we do have to put a level of protection, like some type of barricade around the home, we would certainly consider that as well.
For now, Martin Luther King III, grateful beyond words to the tourists from Utah and from New York City for saving this national landmark.
Personally, I want to say thank you. And it means so much to the nation that you chose to engage and avert what could have been a major catastrophe. We are eternally grateful.
These good Samaritans nearly speechless.
Very welcome to him and to the city and to the entire nation, really.
In Atlanta, John Schierick, 11 Alive News.
Here at 11 Alive, we work to be as transparent as possible to earn and keep your trust. So we wanted to share that we have made the decision not to identify the woman in this case, either on air or online. That decision was made as we await more information from police after the woman reportedly underwent an evaluation at Grady Detention, and also because the charges against this woman do not meet our criteria for identifying her.
The news station in Atlanta, 11 Alive, decided that this woman shouldn't be identified. Now, out of all the crime that happens every day in Atlanta, a lot of the crime also by people who lost their minds, because half the stuff these folks are doing today is just bizarre. But since when did a criminal possibly having mental issues allow them to not be identified to the public? Almost every criminal can be diagnosed with some form of mental disorder if evaluated, from PTSD, anxiety, and depression to schizophrenia and bipolar. Oh yeah, and I can't forget their favorite one they like to call everybody these days on the internet. All the modern day men are supposedly narcissistic. NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, is also a mental health condition. So if you let social media tell it, almost everybody in the news is a mental health case because they all have some sort of disorder. So why is this one being treated differently? Yeah, the suspect is Lanisha Henderson. She's 26 years old. I'll get into more details about her later. It's crazy how these situations are never linked back to these online misandries.
It started out as a work trip to Atlanta, Georgia for Zach Kempf.
We realized Martin Luther King's birthplace was there, and so we were, back and forth and said, well, let's go to Martin Luther King's birthplace.
Turning into so much more in just a matter of minutes, shortly after 5:30 Thursday night.
A woman came up behind me, and there's a little sidewalk in front of the bushes to the left, and she was standing there and had this big 5-gallon gas can.
This is video Kemp took from his phone,
What are you doing?
showing the woman pouring gasoline on the front porch of the historic home. Kemp says he kept filming as he says the woman went to the other side of the home and back.
And then she came past me, and I didn't notice that there was a lighter in the grass too. She grabbed the lighter and then turned around to come back up the porch.
He told Fox 13 News while calling 911 he also blocked the entrance to the porch. Other Good Samaritans nearby jumped in to help, including, Kemp says, 2 men who were police officers from New York who were in town visiting family.
And that's why he's putting you in a position in which
One of them seen here, helping keep the suspect restrained until officers with the Atlanta Police Department arrived.
And the detectives, then arson, then Homeland Security, then the Parks Police, then eventually the chief came because it was such a big deal.
The woman was arrested and now faces charges, including attempted arson.
Park superintendent who got there a little later was standing next to me and was on the phone and whispered that he was on the phone with Dr. King's daughter, that was like a little bit surreal, She was just worried about the house.
The Martin Luther King Jr. Center releasing this statement on X, formerly known as Twitter, saying in part, thanks to the brave intervention of Good Samaritans and the quick response of law enforcement.
Pay attention to the people around you and how they're doing and what's happening to stop something bad from happening.
Now that he's back home and reflecting on what took place, Kemp told me he would like to return to Atlanta and actually tour MLK's birth home, adding that he's glad that it's still there. In Taylorsville, Chris Arnold, Fox 13 News, Utah.
I mean, really, shout out to those men from New York and Utah who stepped in and stopped her from destroying Dr. King's legacy. They jumped into action. They really saved the day. One of them caught all of this on video and called 911. They got involved instantly, asking her what was she doing.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Most people in Atlanta just keep walking and mind their business. They don't really get involved in stuff. But these guys getting into what she had going on and questioning her, it really did save the King legacy, the neighbors, and the neighborhood. When the news started circulating on Thursday evening that a woman tried to burn down a National Historic Site, the birth home of civil rights activist Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a lot of people thought it was a white woman. There was a video clip out, but all the original outlets blocked the woman's face so no one could really see who it was. APD also released a short report that night citing the incident as vandalism at the property located at 501 Auburn Avenue. The woman was transported to Grady for medical and psychological evaluation. Lanisha had a lighter. That's in evidence too, by the way. She was about to light everything up, and in seconds, the whole house would have been gone. Not to mention the neighbors next door, because these houses are so close together. The neighbors could have easily been destroyed too. The King family home is empty, but you have residents in all the houses around this home. So that was very dangerous. And if this woman wasn't stopped, she could have not only damaged property, but she could have also taken lives. The men who stepped in to stop her, they could have also been hurt, because less than a week before this incident, a black man in Atlanta suffered burns while working as a security guard when a female protester for Palestine did some self-deletion tactic involving fire.
We're just trying to take it day by day and keep his spirits up.
It's been a difficult few days for Tangelia Harris and her family as her husband Michael recovers from first, second, and third degree burns on different parts of his body.
Today was pretty hard because I actually watched him clean the wounds.
Sending prayers to the security guard and his family. That's just wild. So yeah, those guys definitely stepped into a dangerous situation, but luckily no one was hurt. Lanisha Henderson, she's been charged by local Atlanta authorities, but she's also facing federal charges. Her arrest record shows she was arrested by APD, and there was a foreign warrant placed on her the next day. The U.S. Marshal stepped in. It's safe to say that Lanisha didn't know this, and many of you watching now probably didn't know that the King family home is now federal property. Yeah, a lot of people didn't know that the King family no longer had control over this house. The National Park Service Foundation quietly purchased this home back in 2018 and turned over ownership to the federal government. Take a look here at the record. The seller is listed as the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Social Change. The buyer is the United States of America. The price, $1.9 million. November 27th, 2018 is the recorded sale date. Oh yeah, and if that didn't shock you, this will. Look at this here. Almost a month and a half later, they also purchased the last home Dr. King lived in Vine City. That's a neighborhood in Atlanta. No one ever talked about this home, but Dr. King was raising his 4 children there with Mrs. Coretta Scott King before he was taken away from his family in 1968 when he was gunned down at a Memphis motel. Bernice King, Dr. King's daughter, and the administrator was listed on the sales document. The ownership transferred to the United States of America on January 8, 2019 at a significantly lower value. They got this house for only $400,000, which was a steal, over 3,600 square feet, right around the corner from the Georgia World Congress Center and by the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where a lot is happening over there. Dilapidated properties are being sold for $700,000, $800,000, over $1 million due to plans around there for redevelopment. Investors simply wanting a piece of the land. On top of that, Dr. King's 1966 Chevy Impala was still inside of the garage when the house was sold. The car had been there for decades, over 50 years. King left it there when he went to Memphis for the speech and the work he was doing on the Poor People's Campaign that led him to making that trip. Even the original couch that Mrs. Coretta Scott King had in the living room was still wrapped up in plastic like the older folks used to do back in the day. So yeah, $400,000 for that property there. I guess the family didn't want to be bothered with it, I don't know. Still, I have to admit that it's a bit disappointing that the children will sell their parents' legacy to the same government that took their father out. The King legacy is now owned and controlled by the United States of America. But I digress. As you can see on the incident report, the first charge is arson in the 2nd degree. Some people tried to cover for her, saying how is it arson? They didn't know what she was going to do. Like, cut it out. She had a lighter, having the gas, pouring it all over the place, and then she tried to light it. They had to tackle her down and get the lighter from her. Lanisha was also charged with interfering with government property. Many items listed here as evidence, including Lanisha's gas can, a ring she had on, a lighter, her iPhone with a pink case. They also took in the car she was driving, a black Chevy Cruze. The incident report details that there was an officer already in the area when a call came in reporting this incident. The police wrote, multiple witnesses were initially on the scene, but soon left after Ms. Henderson was placed into our custody. They went on to say that everyone else left, but the 2 men from Utah stayed back to help with the investigation, as they were the first parties on the scene to witness what initially occurred at the location. They stated they were originally from Utah, but were down in Atlanta for work and decided to visit the historical monument. They knew the building was closed, but just wanted a chance to see the building before heading back to their homes in Utah. And you know, that's pretty normal. Any time of the day, you can always find people walking by the house, even if they don't go inside. The yard is basically wide open. You can walk on the porch, look around the yard. So yeah, that's normal. That's when they spotted Lanisha, and initially they thought that she was watering plants. However, they kept trying to speak to her. She was ignoring them, and they realized that was not a pot of water in her hand. For those unfamiliar, you always have a lot of tourists in this area, lots of popular businesses on the street over as well on Edgewood, and there's a lot to see there. On that stretch of Auburn, you got the fire station right at the end of the block of MLK's home. That's historic fire station number 6, located at that corner of Auburn Avenue and Boulevard. In the building right across the street from the fire station, there's like a whole wing dedicated to Rosa Parks. There's also an exhibit for Mrs. Coretta Scott King. You have the big museum commemorating Dr. King, the original Ebenezer Church, where Dr. King was a pastor, his father was a pastor, as well as his grandfather, and the location where his mother lost her life. That, by the way, happened just steps away from Dr. MLK Jr.'s burial site. And when I say it's something about that area where the burial site is, you just have to go there and be there to understand what I'm saying. As well as the house up the road. That's why it's very shocking that anybody would try to burn the house down. The house in question was built for a white family in 1895. The 2-story home is over 128 years old. It was in MLK's family for over 109 years, since 1909, before it was sold to the government. Dr. King's grandfather Reverend Adam Daniel Williams purchased the house for $3,500. He moved into the house with his wife, Jeannie Parks. The couple had one daughter, Alberta Christine, their only child of 3 to survive infancy. Alberta grew up and married a minister at her father's church. That minister was Martin Luther King Sr. of Stockbridge, Georgia. The two had known each other since their teenage years, and their marriage came after 8 years of courtship. At the time the young minister King was in the church under the leadership of Mrs. King's father, MLK Sr. moved into the family home with his wife, where she gave birth to 3 of their children, including Martin Luther King Jr. His father, Martin Sr., studied at Morehouse College, worked in the daytime as a mechanic's helper and a railroad firefighter. About 6 years later, after Alberta gave birth to her children in her childhood home, her father, Reverend Williams, passed away in the same house from a heart attack in 1931 while playing with his grandbaby, MLK Jr.'s sister. 10 years later, her mother, MLK Jr.'s grandmother, also died of a heart attack. The King family moved out of the home to another house on Boulevard, but always maintained the original family home. First, it was a rental property, and after Dr. King tragically lost his life years later, his wife, Coretta Scott King, converted the home into a museum. So what Lanisha did here was not a little thing. This was really big. Now, speaking of Lanisha, her Facebook is interesting. In 2020, she posted this. It's a post of a guy standing in front of the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. He's got on a Falcons jersey, number 21 Deion Sanders, with a red gas can in his hand. And it says, "Lord, forgive me for what I'm gonna do if these folks don't rise up tomorrow." I guess we can say that didn't age well. Then a day or so before the incident, Lanisha posted that she loved her dad. Now, it was her dad who showed up with her 3 sisters when she got in trouble. He's been cooperating and telling the police that his daughter had mental issues. He's originally from Eufaula, Alabama. Lanisha is also from the area. Looks like her dad moved to Atlanta in the early 2000s. Lanisha may have stayed back in Alabama or at some point spent time in both Georgia and Alabama. She graduated from high school in Eufaula, Alabama. That was back in 2016. So her putting that she was from Atlanta on Facebook may not be true. Everything is pointing towards her coming from Alabama. She also told Facebook that she moved to Tallahassee, Florida in 2020, where she settled in the Southwood neighborhood briefly. However, when she was arrested, the address listed on the incident report is in Brandon, Florida, which is in the Tampa Bay, St. Pete, Sarasota area. I also saw a discrepancy with the address on the jail records versus the incident report. The jail records had her listed in Eufaula, Alabama. Lanisha, she's been in multiple places. She spent a couple of years in the U.S. Navy. She's got the black womanist vibe, and her Facebook also suggested that she was a supporter of Malachi York, which is very controversial. You have people who support him, that's on his side, and you have others who condemn him. Malachi York was sentenced to 135 years in prison on RICO charges surrounding financial crimes and tampering with young girls and boys. Men like Brother Polite defended him, and as you know, Brother Polite himself was sentenced to 7 years in prison this year for tampering with one of the daughters of one of the single mothers in his harem. You know, women join these groups like this and love offering up their daughters and their sons. And I remember reporting on Brother Polite when this happened. Of course, people didn't like it, especially the women, because you know I'm going to tell the whole truth, not just one part. But I hate that I was right. You know, it's a difference between allegations and accusations with actual evidence. Yes, evidence, not feelings, not if you like somebody, not if you don't like somebody, evidence. And you know, you can't argue with DNA. Now, what would Lanisha know about this guy Malachi York? Not sure, because he's been locked up since she was a toddler. So Lanisha putting this up on her Facebook page, Free Malachi Z. York, and then like the same day, she went and tried to burn down the MLK home. I don't know, it's all really bizarre, and we still don't know the motive. For one, somebody please tell me, why is all the mainstream media ignoring this story? I guess it didn't fit the narrative because she's a black woman, so they may rule out classifying this as a hate crime and completely ignore that there's a growing population of black women who are open misandrists and constantly spewing their misandry aimed at black men, literally calling for them to be harmed. All of them are nutcases, obviously, but that doesn't mean they should be ignored and not held accountable. I'm still trying to understand how Lanisha flew off the handle and aimed to destroy the legacy home of Dr. King. Let's be honest, Over the last few years, you have a growing number of people trying to discredit MLK and destroy his legacy, and they're not all non-black people. As disappointing as it is, you have more and more black feminists and black misandrists disrespecting Dr. King's name, like B. Simone and her bitter misandrist friend that she had that podcast with. When they made those comments about Dr. King then, I told nothing but the truth about both of those heathens. And people tried to take up for the friend, saying that she wasn't a misandrist, she was married. And I'm like, come on, people can't be this slow. Who told y'all that feminists and misandrists can't get married? Why do you think the divorce rate is so high? You think these Jezebels just went rogue or something after marriage? No, just like I explained with the Jeannie Mai situation. If you missed that video, the link is below. They are already like that before they walk down the aisle. So I wasn't surprised when B. Simone's friend announced that she was divorced on the show, and then they never can get along with each other for a long period of time. B. Simone and the lady fell out. Yeah, but that crap they spewed out about Dr. King was disrespectful, very, very disrespectful, and they're not the only ones. It's a steady drumbeat of rhetoric about Dr. King from black women, and it was not a coincidence. As for Lanisha, she did go before a judge who denied bail and was afraid to let her out, thinking that she could do something like this again.
Ms. Henderson, I did not set a bond in your case today.
Fulton County Magistrate Judge Holly Hughes denied 26-year-old Lanisha Henderson bond Saturday. Hughes gave two reasons for doing it. First, that Henderson doesn't live in Georgia.
She gave an address in a different state, so I find that there is a likelihood that she may not return to court.
Second was the shocking nature of the crime.
I'm extremely concerned about the randomness of this event. There does not seem to be any reason or tie to that particular location, and I do believe that based on that alone, given the complete and utter randomness, that she does pose a danger. I think we all know that this is on video, so you clearly see what she's doing. The entire thing has been recorded, and she did not want to stop what she was doing. So Mr. Cazzoli, for today, she will remain in a no bond status until we have some further information to go forward on. Okay, I do believe that this act would have been completed, but for some citizens jumping in to stop it. And I am leaving her in a no bond status today as a danger to the community and the community's property.
This video shows two retired New York City police officers, and they're also brothers, who sprang into action.
So I looked to my brother and I said, let's go get her. So we jumped back in our rental red Tesla and chased her down the street. And we saw her trying to run behind a house. We jumped out the car, we chased her behind the home, and we was able to pin her down and apprehend her behind the house.
King's son, Martin Luther King III, says the family and the King Foundation are extremely grateful to these men.
That just goes to show the great humanity of people when they see someone who may be attempting to do something that is terrible.
Now, Henderson is set to have another hearing where her team will get another opportunity to make their case if she should get bond. Federal charges could be on the way as well.
The minimum in prison is 5 years for federal arson. 20 years is a max. I think they should at least give her the minimum. No less than 5, no more than 10. They may land at 7 or 8. But yes, send her down that road, make her take her meds while she's in there, get her some counseling. She could participate in those inmate support groups, but that's where she should go. It's not just the property, the history, the legacy, the family deep rooted in American history, an entire family that really fought and dedicated their lives. The men had the most stress on them, and for the most part, they all died first, whether it was from stress or if somebody took them out. Of course, you had Dr. King's granddaddy, that was a heart attack. Dr. King, he was taken out. The depression and stress that their brothers and sisters went through. We still don't really know the truth about what happened to Dr. King's younger brother, and then the grief that women lived with for decades. First, Dr. King was taken out. Then his brother's untimely death was a year later, 1969. And then 5 years after that, Dr. King's father was targeted, MLK Sr., at church. That was the original target. But he couldn't get to him quick enough, so that man took out Dr. King's mother while she was playing the organ and a deacon. All the life that Mrs. Alberta King experienced in that house and another black woman was about to destroy it. But of course, no one cares. They see a woman with gas can in hand and they don't stress the issue. They would rather sit up all day speculating on non-factual information while at the same time saying protect black women, but could care less about protecting the legacy of this woman here. Any of these black women connected to the King legacy. No, they don't care about those black women. Real black women can't get support from them, just 304s, rebellas, and flamingos. That's who they support. Let's go ahead and get the conversation started. Let me know what you think about this below. Special thank you to Selden GA Dogs. I appreciate you for all of your support. Don't forget that you can support this channel as well. Links to Cash App and PayPal are below. Ladies, fellas, want a balanced analysis, want the truth from a woman's perspective? Then you're going to want to subscribe to this channel and don't forget to like and share.